Hello, everybody. Welcome into our Dog Nation postgame show presented by the UGA Bookstore. We're here on the field. I believe they call it historic Grant Field, maybe Bobby Dodd Stadium. Big win for the Georgia Bulldogs today against Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. What was the final score? Was it 45-0? 45-0. Georgia can say once again that it runs this state. Lots of history made today. Of course, Georgia continues its streak of winning every game this century played in this stadium. Undefeated regular season for the first time since 1982. 12-0 for the first time since 1980. A chance next week to be 13-0 for the first time in program history. Obviously, turning its sights towards the SEC championship. This was, for me today, a perfect cap-off to what's already been an incredibly enjoyable season. Of course, we all know that the big games are still yet to be played, starting next week in the SEC championship and then presumably college football playoff after that. And I think you can start to presume some things on that regardless of result next week. But today, to see it conclude the way that it did, beating Tech the way that Georgia did here today, seeing a lot of different guys get involved, seeing Georgia really punctuate so much of what it's done well so far this year, I got to tell you, I was thoroughly entertained, thoroughly enjoyed everything I saw from UGA here today.
Brandon, you want me to go into often do a Nick Saban type rant this week's special? Now, all the contrarians out here, please interact with us. So you got a shutout. You got the sports enthusiast entertainment wagering covered. You got some explosives from the offense, lots of explosives from the offense. You got a thumb of the nose to the Mackey Award Committee from Brock Bowers. You get George Pickens on the field for multiple plays. You get more Don Blaylock. You get Nolan Smith on the field. If you need something else from this win that you wanted doctored up, please let us know, because I think this was methodical. It was a systematic evisceration of the Georgia Tech program. The stadium looked about 90-10.
And listen, we've got to park on that for a second. That's not an exaggeration. I do not say this lightly. There was such an overwhelming UGA presence. In fact, you and I were actually talking about this before the game. We were driving up from Cordele, where we spent the night last night after having been in Thomasville for high school football. We're talking about how the high water mark for stadium takeover in terms of not total number of fans, but in terms of total saturation of a stadium was Vanderbilt in 2019. And I said that it's mathematically impossible to have a larger percentage of a stadium than what Georgia had. Now, it's only about 30-something thousand fans because it's obviously a pretty small stadium. But I said from a saturation standpoint, you can't have a larger percentage of a stadium occupied than what that was. Today certainly pushed the envelope on that. It was, and I mean this literally, at least 70% Georgia fans in here today, and it could have even been more than that. But I'm talking about there wasn't a stitch lower than 70-30 in terms of the overall ratio of Georgia fan to Georgia Tech fan today. It was that kind of showing from the UGA fan.
Let me tell you a funny story, folks, because everybody saw the TV. You're reading the stories on DogNation.com from Connor Riley. So right over there is kind of where the photographers are at. And everybody remembers the classic Richard LeCount photo. He's in front of some guys when people are showing off their middle finger or something like that to Richie. Well, the players all did that down there today, but the really funny interaction was there was a group of Georgia Tech students, and they were all body painted up. And while the game was going on, Brandon, I've never heard this before. They were singing Christmas carols, but it had to be religious Christmas carols. And that's how detached Georgia Tech's fan base is right now. But you want to know what they were not doing when they were not singing Christmas carols? They were saying less than heavenly things about Georgia Tech's football program. And I just thought the stark contrast of "Hark the Herald Angels Sing," and then they're talking about why is Jeff Collins punting again, or why is Jeff Collins taking so long between snaps to try and believe that clock so the number doesn't look like 65-0 or something like that. I thought it was very entertaining.
So that line about in the Christmas Carol about Round Yon Virgin hits pretty close to home around here. That's
ooh. We didn't practice that at all.
It's that kind of day here, folks. So we're going to take a lot of your comments. It's our Dog Nation post-game show presented by the UGA Bookstore. We're live on the field here at Bobby Dodd Stadium. 45-0. Georgia can say we run this state once again with a victory over the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. You also mentioned the name Brock Bowers. I want to talk about him for a moment. I think, and you can say this really, I think, without hyperbole here. Or hyperbole, is that how you say it? Hyperbole. The point is that Bowers right now, I think, is emerging. And really, it's only, I think, in competition with George Pickens as a freshman in 2019. He's emerging as the most prolific pass-catching target in the Kirby Smart era. And there's lots of different ways you can kind of compare him. You can compare him to other tight ends currently right now. You can compare him to tight ends historically in the Georgia program, and Bowers going to fare very well in all those comparisons. You can suggest, well, actually, he's not really a tight end. The reason why he got snubbed for the Mackey Awards because he should be considered more of a wide receiver, and maybe one day he'll be in line for the Blitnikoff Award, and maybe he will. You can say all those things about Brock Bowers, and it's all potentially accurate. I think my point, though, here is without putting a label on what position that he plays or without doing anything like that, he's just simply as prolific a pass-catching target as existed in the Smart era. Obviously, the rushing touchdown mark that he's, or I should say the receiving touchdown mark that he's set here today, getting his 10th through the air, that's a part of this. It's just an amazing, amazing performance from a freshman pass-catching target. You can call him a tight end and say the Mackey Award snubbed him, and that's probably true. You can call him a receiver and say, listen, he's doing it about as well as anybody right now. This continues to be a remarkable story. Georgia needed those weapons on the edge, and we've all talked about who it might be, and some of the guys I think we thought would be in that discussion have been hampered by injury. And there were obviously high hopes for Bowers coming into the year, but I don't know that anyone could have really said, no, he's going to be this explosive and this dynamic for this Georgia offense. But he's turned out to be every bit as good as you ever could have hoped he would be.
I think the label is if you want to Pulp Fiction reference there. I think the label is Georgia's top offensive weapon, and you got to go through the list. He's probably better than Lawrence Cager was. He's better than Javon Wims was. He's better than Isaiah McKenzie in Kirby's first year in terms of a guy that was the bread carrier and everything else. And then you add in those plays he's made on jet sweeps and runs so far this season, and he's probably, at least you could say when you're trying to figure out what Brock Bowers means to this team right now, most effective offensive weapon, maybe the best offensive player on the team right now. Maybe Jamari Salyer, what great work he's done at left tackle is a guy that comes up in that discussion as well. And maybe the flickers you're getting from James Cook. But, Brandon, my friend, it all just kind of feels like it's rounding third where it needs to be heading into get your popcorn for this week, Dog Nation, because after all these lackluster, Sisters of the Poor, lackluster weeks, you've got a frying pan week with the Crimson Tide on Saturday.
And you do. We're obviously going to talk a lot about that over the course of our time together here on the Dog Nation post-game show presented by the UGA Bookstore. The other thing we have our eye on, and I haven't really been able to see much of this. I know a lot of you are following this as you're watching us right now. That's Michigan on top of Ohio State right now. I've got the score at 35-27 with 4:39 to go in the game. Y'all can correct me on that and help me stay up to date on what that is. And obviously this has been a dominant game for Michigan that Ohio State's trying to narrow the gap on in the closing moments here. And I think one of the things that I take from this is that this is the sport moving in the direction of UGA. Not only is Georgia making its march through the season, obviously a dominant number one, but the way in which the sport is evolving around Georgia right now is also moving in the direction of the Dogs, because when you see up there very cold weather in Ann Arbor, Michigan, very challenging day with the conditions, and it's been the physicality of Michigan that's kind of ruled that day there. And listen, I got great respect for what Ohio State can do through the air. I've got great respect for the high-powered nature of that offense, but they have clearly met their match, at least so far today, and we'll see how the result concludes. But at least so far today, they have certainly met their match in terms of the overall physicality that Michigan's brought to the table, which is a clear signal for what Georgia could have in store for the entirety of the rest of the country when it comes to the college football playoff. So the fact that Ohio State is losing right now, I think as a Georgia fan, you take that as good news potentially for a couple of reasons. Styles make fights. The Michigan style is just easier for Georgia to contend with. But also it's a signal of, well, if Michigan State can get a big win like this against a playoff team like Ohio State, assuming this finale holds here. If Michigan can do that along the ways to beating Ohio State, then imagine how much more equipped a team like Georgia would be to be able to do the same type of thing. This is a result, in other words, that I think that Georgia fans should be paying close attention to.
I think it's very simple. What goes through my mind, Brandon, when you mention those things is I think the national narrative is evolving. I think that I like that word you use right there, mutating. I like that word as well. Here's what's happening. Georgia's becoming that team where it was a 2019 LSU, a 2020 Alabama, where they're just so much better than everybody else in the country. Look at Georgia's resume. I mean, it really is a resume that stands out head and shoulders. Jordan Davis head and shoulders above the rest of the country right now.
Greg Rosenberg says, I think that Brock Bowers is faster than George Pickens. He might be. On the catch that Bowers makes over here, where you got defensive backs closing in on Bowers, and I literally don't know they could have gotten him down in a two-hand touch situation. I don't know they laid a hand on him on that 70-plus yard touchdown that he scored today. His athleticism, it's really phenomenal. I mean, we've had a whole season to get used to it, but I still find myself really blown away by what he's capable of doing athletically.
I've followed Bowers as much as anybody on our platform, and I remember the stories about him catching 15 touchdowns in a 7-on-7 weekend. He was that type of receiver, and folks, remember, he didn't get a senior year of high school football, and I remember watching him train and get ready while he was waiting for the chance to come to Georgia, and you saw him doing all these explosive lifts, these things where he would do a lot of, almost Vertimax type stuff where he's exploding, holding weights, and he's turned himself into a phenomenal college football athlete. It's like the power, but also the speed and the shake and the wiggle, the route running ability. And, Brandon, we got to think about this because there's going to come a point where Georgia has, and this is what I said on our car ride since I feel like we've been in the car for like 2 days straight now. There's going to come a point where Georgia's going to have Brock Bowers, Oscar Delp, and Pierce Sperling III all at the tight end position at the same time on campus at the University of Georgia. And you want to talk about another thing we talk about when we're rolling through who knows where, Worth County, Sylvester, Moultrie, a little town called Omega. Anybody that's from Omega, give us a shout out right now. But, Brandon, this is what you're seeing here is that narrative about Georgia, the tight ends. Georgia doesn't feature the tight end. The tight end doesn't get any run at Georgia. Any playmaking ability, large part to Brock Bowers here, but that thing's blown to smithereens now.
Dawg 57 also in the comment section asking about injuries, how healthy Georgia came out of this game. I guess the one big news from an injury standpoint, really there are two things. We'll talk more about George Pickens throughout the program, but George Pickens does return today, gets a chance to take a few snaps, and also caught a football today. So that's obviously really exciting for him personally because the journey you go through to get back on the football field is obviously the kind of thing that requires a lot of perseverance. So congratulations to George for being able to show that, but it's also good for UGA to have a player of that caliber potentially coming back. Only kind of partially involved today, but the fact that he was on the football field at all, I think, suggests more involvement for him possibly in the SEC championship game or if Georgia makes it the college football playoff. However, there was also the injury situation to Kearis Jackson today, and we'll hear from Kirby Smart about exactly how severe that was. Sometimes these kinds of things end up being precautionary measure. I believe it was ribs for Jackson that took him off the field. You can correct me on that if I'm not accurate on that. But Jackson, did leave the game. He was replaced as a punt returner by Ladd McConkey and didn't come back into the wide receiver spot there either. So the only injury that I'm aware of from today, and we don't know, at least I don't know personally yet how serious it was, is the fact that Kearis Jackson did leave this game with injury.
So Kearis looked in good spirits. I can report this. He must have went from the Coca-Cola, Georgia Power, Earthlink, Kroger, Invesco, QQQ, all the way up and down that sponsor wall right here at Georgia Tech, taking selfies, signing autographs at the end of the game. Brendan, fun little vignette. We always try to catch these things and bring them to everybody on the broadcast. Right about there, Buzz came and kind of slid right in front of the dog kennel where Ugga 10 was at. And he started maneuvering and basically gesturing towards him. And all of a sudden, Harry Dog comes in. Brendan, they square off, they line up. Eventually, it ends up with Harry Dog pancaking Buzz, really just right here. And it was, I don't know if that's a gentleman's agreement among mascots that they'll play some pro wrestling theater with one making the other look silly after every game.
I wondered about that, yeah. Buzz comes out here and does the job for Harry.
And, literally, it looked much like the game. Buzz kind of laid down just like Jeff Collins' program did today.
Our buddy Lesko over in the YouTube comment section mentioned the fact that Tech closed out its regular season with 100-0. They were outscored 100-0 the final two games of the season. That is not good. That is not good.
Brandon, do you remember when they took the field for the first time in front of their home faithful today at historic Mark Richt Field? People are correcting me on the internet all the time today, but they got boos when they hit the field for their last home game. And you wonder if this program's ever going to build, it's ever going to soar, because whatever's happening right now is certainly not working.
42-27, I'm now told the Michigan score is. It's a Michigan team that's given it Ohio State all day long. And listen, as we said before, it's styles that make fights. And it's a Michigan style today that's getting the best of Ohio State. And, for the Buckeyes, listen, I expected them to play better today than they've turned out to be playing. But, this is a program that has not really faced a lot of true road test this season. And at times when they've gone on the road, they haven't played well. And obviously today, the biggest example of that at all. Easy Brown says Buzz got squashed. Apparently Easy was here and kind of saw that. That's good stuff. Mike Gay checked in to say Ohio State was overrated. Obviously, based on this result today, maybe some folks are going to say that. Ernie Tilley says Alabama and Auburn starting. We'll obviously be watching that pretty closely because for Georgia fans, it's now a chance to turn attention to the college football matchup that's going to be on everybody's mind next week in the SEC Championship against Alabama. And, Jeff, last night you and I were in Thomasville. We saw a great high school football game, two great teams, Raven County and Thomasville, a battle of number 1 versus number 2. There are actually 3 1 versus 2 battles in Georgia high school football last night. And the reason why is because you don't seed teams in high school football in Georgia. You match up brackets, and oftentimes you can have the 2 best teams sometimes meeting way early, including last night, 3 quarterfinal matchups. And I think in a lot of ways, college football this year may work out to be the same kind of thing. That, listen, there's no such thing as an anticlimactic national championship, but in terms of the path towards that national championship, it is entirely possible that the toughest, most significant thing that Georgia's going to do on that path towards a national championship is play Alabama next week. It's entirely possible that that's it. And that if Georgia wins that game, then the actual next games, the ones that will clinch the national championship for Georgia, may be somewhat of an anticlimax given the fact that the real test is Alabama next week. And obviously I think that Georgia, by virtue of being 12-0 and by virtue of being clearly, without question, the best team in the country all season long, maybe they now have, and I've been hesitant to want to say this, when you look at the rest of the landscape of the sport, you're forced to acknowledge this is likely true. Maybe Georgia now has put itself in a position to be in the playoff no matter what, even if it loses next week. However, the opportunity that exists for Georgia to beat Alabama and eliminate Alabama is what you're really playing for. Georgia next week may not be playing for its own playoff spot as much as it is playing for the chance to exclude Alabama from the playoff. And if it does that, what happens in the national semifinal and the national championship game may truly be, as I said before, just a little bit anticlimactic.
Might feel a little bit like a Democratic or Republican national convention where somebody just shows up to accept the nomination. But I want to get your thought on this right now. The Ohio State loss, what does that immediately mean to you? Does that mean that it brings even a 2-loss Alabama back into the vernacular for the playoff? Or does it mean Georgia better beat Alabama by 20 to snuff all those hopes out?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I don't think Alabama's played week to week well enough to make a strong argument for itself if it's not SEC champion. A few weeks ago I did. Now I don't quite think that anymore. In the case of what's happening with the Big Ten today, I mean, Michigan has been in this conversation all year long. I've said many times that I felt like that Michigan was maybe the team not getting quite enough credit, not getting quite enough discussion, and today they're kind of validating that. So you got to think for the college football playoff, the Big Ten champion has a spot almost no matter what. Now, if it's an upset win for Wisconsin, that changes things a little bit. But the winner of this Michigan-Ohio State game would seem to be in a pretty good position to make the college football playoff. And you'll wait and see what happens with the Big 12. With the possibility you could see Oklahoma and Oklahoma State playing twice here late in the season, with a chance to see a rematch of Bedlam in the Big 12 title game. But ultimately, Alabama, I think, has put itself in a position where it has to win the SEC to make the college football playoff by virtue of the fact that it does have the regular season loss. It's maybe something that Georgia doesn't quite have to be said for it right now. But as I said before, that doesn't change Georgia's motivation for next week. If anything, it wants to be motivated, I believe, so it doesn't have to beat Alabama that second time, because obviously in any kind of football situation, beating the same team twice is certainly a big challenge. Yeah, and, that give you a little bit of deja vu there with Georgia and Alabama maybe playing the wonders and worries about that. Really you're going to have a separation Saturday. That's the long-standing promotional item for a big Saturday. But, we're going to learn a lot out of Alabama, Auburn, and we're going to learn a lot about Oklahoma State. And then next week with Michigan, like, Brandon, who's in the playoffs if Michigan loses to Wisconsin? I think there's a chance that Ohio State could come back into the conversation just on the basis of the fact that you can say, well, the game they lost late in the year is a road game, tough spot, things like that. But obviously you're talking about Cincinnati unbeaten and in the top 4 right now. You've got Notre Dame hanging there as a 1-loss team there too. So there are clearly some things happening around UGA right now. I want to get some quotes here from the post-game press conferences. It's our Dog Nation post-game show. We're presented by the UGA bookstore. And, of course, your chance to go do some shopping at the UGA bookstore right now. Go to Athens and get all the great UGA apparel you need to be looking good for SEC Championship Saturday next weekend, or the college football playoff that we believe is going to come after that. The UGA bookstore, the place you go to get stocked up for all that. And you may say, well, BA, I can't be in Athens right now. I can't go and see all that Peter Millar gear and Vineyard Vines gear and Southern Tide and the Nike coaches gear and all the other cool stuff, Tommy Bahama, all the other cool stuff that the UGA bookstore keeps in stock. If you can't do that, you can do your shopping online anytime you want to. UGAbookstore.com, that's the website. UGAbookstore.com, and get stocked up on everything that you need to make sure you're looking your best as Georgia heads through its championship run. The most important games of the season still yet to come. And, of course, a great place to get that holiday shopping taken care of there as well. All right, some comments here. First of all, get Kirby Smart, who says, what an incredible turnout from our fan base. It felt like a home game. And this was a weird day in which there were a lot of Georgia fans here, but the game was so lackluster that almost the Georgia fans themselves didn't have a ton to cheer about because Georgia was just such a thorough beatdown of Georgia Tech that all intrigue was removed from the game so early. But there was that moment, early third quarter, when Tech does decide to go for it on fourth down right here behind where I'm standing right now. And that was the moment when I think you really get the full sense of just how many Georgia fans there were there. You know, Tech almost having to go silent count, probably did have to go silent count in its own stadium, loud as if Georgia truly was the home team there in that moment. And it was really like that. Those fourth down plays, those were the moments where I really think you got a great sense for just how many Georgia fans were here, because that was that moment where Georgia fans were able to go out there and get loud and really make a lot of noise.
I mean, you think about it, Brandon, everybody likes to find funny little nuances or whatever, but we might look back at this season and say the last time Georgia played a road game was at Tennessee, because this was not a hostile environment. You would add the Charleston Southern game, you would add the Missouri State around that, true home games, and then you would add the neutral site games to follow.
So Stetson Bennett was asked about George Pickens and the fact that some people thought all he wants to do was just get healthy so he can go play in the NFL, and Stetson says he thinks that's silly, obviously suggesting that Pickens got a lot to play for here in the college world there as well. And I would say that's certainly true. I mean, George Pickens is a tenacious competitor, and competitors don't need a reason to want to compete. And I do think, regardless of how this ends, however many more of these moments on the field that Pickens has this year, maybe it's a lot, maybe it becomes a focal point at sometimes for Georgia's receiving attack, or maybe he's just out there contributing the way that he did today, getting a chance to catch a football and work his way back into it. Whatever it is, Pickens deserves to be rewarded for all of this. He deserves to be congratulated, because it takes a lot of work to be where George is standing right now. And coming off a year in 2020 when there were so many opt-outs, and so many of those opt-outs were like the player just vanishing into thin air, nowhere to be found, going to train for the NFL, seemingly leaving college in the rearview mirror. George hasn't done that. I think it speaks to the vibe that exists around Georgia all season long. That's a contagious vibe. It's the kind of thing that people want to draw closer to. It's the kind of thing that people want to be a part of. George Pickens himself there. So I do think it's great news for Georgia that Pickens back. Obviously, I'm a huge Pickens fan. I'd love nothing more than for him to make a huge catch for Georgia in the SEC championship or sometime after that. I'd love that. But just the fact that he has stuck around, worked to get on the football field, I think Pickens today deserves to be celebrated for that, because it would be very easy to make a very different decision than the one that George has chosen to make.
Yeah, it's an Irk Russell decision. It's a team over me. And maybe someone can say, well, the better George Pickens plays over the next 3 or 4 games, pardon me for that, the more his stock goes up from maybe low second round to mid first round, high second round. Mid-first round to late first round. And you're looking at that draft, and we all know those draft slots, Brandon, mean about $10 million. Big difference there. But I've got to take about Pickens. And, Georgia fans, I'll have an appreciation for Pickens. Some people say he's just so dadgum mean, and they like that. And they like the way he makes plays, and they like what he did in that end zone right over there a couple years ago. But I'm going to say this. I'm going to say this, Brandon. He gets in these games and makes a touchdown here, a touchdown there, and maybe – changes a game for Georgia in this situation where he could have just rested that knee and maybe collected some late second round, early third round money. There's going to be a lot of reverence. I think he's totally going to amplify, supersize his legacy at the University of Georgia. He comes back for a playoff run, and we don't need him. I would say we don't need him in the media, the analyst side here. We don't need to see George Pickens have a Peach Bowl or a Sugar Bowl type Baylor performance in every game to really hit the stratosphere. But you're going to see some real reverence around George Pickens. He comes back, plays well, helps Georgia, adds a little bit to Georgia's victories on their march to a championship. I think there's going to be a little bit of really strong sentiment for what George Pickens might be doing over the next 3 or 4 games of his football career.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. It's more from Stetson Bennett here saying 12-0 is a big accomplishment, but now the real fun starts. Yeah, it's one of those things where I think both those things can be true. On the one hand, no one can deny that what's about to happen for Georgia is going to define the way in which the season's remembered one way or another. But I also think it is appropriate to stop and say, wow, 12-0 regular season. I mean, I'm in my 40s, or early 40s, but 40s nonetheless. Very early 40s, I like to think.
Very, very early.
But the point is like I haven't really seen this. I mean, I was alive in 1982, but I'm not old enough to remember 1982. And, opposing fans can insert their jokes if they want to, but honestly, I'm not here to hear it. I'm not really old enough to have seen Georgia go undefeated for a regular season. And beyond that, I was talking to our colleague Connor Riley about this a little earlier. I'd actually like to see somebody do the research of not just the consecutive wins for Georgia on its way to the most in program history, but the consecutive wins by 17 or more points. I mean, not only has Georgia run through the season, they haven't played a close game since September 4th. I mean, that's mind-boggling how dominant Georgia has been. So I am right there with everybody else. We all acknowledge that it's what happens next Saturday and the couple of games that hopefully come after that are going to determine how this season's remembered. But I can say here today that I woke up very early this morning and I was very tired. But the thing that I was excited about driving to the stadium today was not just getting a chance to beat Tech and say we run this state, but getting a chance to say I got to see Georgia go 12-0. That's really – I got to tell you, that feels pretty good to even say that out loud.
Folks, I want you to consider this. Kirby might have a team this strong 2 or 3 more times in his career at Georgia, but I don't know if any single one entity of a Georgia team will be able to say they were number one for 8-9 weeks in a row, and this is what this team is accomplishing. Folks, it's really hard to be ranked number one for this long a stretch of a season, this balance of a season, and again, the footnotes are everywhere on this season. Who's not available right now? There's Tate Ratledge. There's, the Eric Gilberts of the world. There's just getting George Pickens back. There's guys like Tyke Smith. Jamari Salyer's been down for a few weeks now. I mean, Brandon, what they're doing with, Marcus Rosemy, Jermaine Burton coming in, coming out. I mean, it's almost like the potential that this team had if they ever got full strength. I think that's going to be something folks will look back on and go, man, what – Georgia did this and this and this, and they really did it. Folks, remember, everybody still calls Stetson the backup quarterback, or at least not the chosen one quarterback at the beginning of the year. And really, I think what Georgia has did, in spite of their adversity left and right in this season, could go down to maybe perhaps the most special, juicy part at the center of this championship run.
I've got more of your comments coming up. Let me give you a couple more quotes here. This from Kirby Smart. Our expectation was to come in and win this game. We know it's a big one coming up. Everyone has kind of had it circled. In the last 2 weeks, we've tried to be ascending. That will be the focus this week. We need to be at our best. And I think it's one of the things I can certainly appreciate about Kirby and this team is that Georgia fans want both. Georgia fans want to be healthy and focus on the SEC championship. But there is also that desire for fans to go out and get the rivalry win. And it was kind of nice to see. Georgia celebrated today winning this game a lot more than they've celebrated some other games earlier this year. I'm always kind of curious to see, is it a quick prayer at the middle of the field and a run back to the locker room, or is there some time to greet the fans and kind of, share some hugs and some photos and things like that? And today was a little bit of a celebration. Frankly, it was nowhere near as some of the celebrations I've seen when Georgia's beaten Georgia Tech in the past. Maybe a signal this team truly does have a lot more to play for than just an in-state rivalry win. But there was some celebration here again today, and I like that. I like the fact that Georgia can handle its business against Georgia Tech without taking any of its focus off getting ready for Alabama the following week. I'm happy that it's like the meme online, find you somebody who can do both. I like the fact that Georgia can do both. They can get ready for Alabama and it can beat down Tech, because in my world there's room enough to enjoy both those things.
Such a contrast. The last time we were here celebrating and broadcasting and chronicling a big Georgia victory on the flats, Georgia was also going into the SEC championship, but that finely tuned sports car had a couple flat tires going in to go face LSU. And I think perhaps the biggest impact of this win for me is, you mentioned Karis Jackson at the top of the show. Looks like some ribs. Like I mentioned, just a little feedback. He looked like he was cordial and great spirits, posing with fans at the end of this game in the end zone over there. But really, Georgia, a lot of guys. You saw a lot more Nolan Smith today. He looked himself. Georgia will go into this SEC championship game. There's no Pickens suspension. There's no mega DeAndre Swift injury or anything like that. And probably that's the best thing, how you survive and advance with all your playmakers intact.
Let me also say this as well, that putting aside however you feel that the 2021 version of Alabama compares to the 2019 version of LSU, that's the last opponent that Georgia faced in the SEC championship, just compare Georgia to Georgia. It's not my intention to disparage anything, but that's a Georgia team in 2019 that was really struggling to average about 21 points per game in SEC play. Points were hard to come by that season, whereas this Georgia team hasn't failed to score at least 30 since the first game of the season. And today, another day in those 40s. This is a Georgia team that pitches another shutout today. And you think about that. This is a Georgia team that set the high water mark for sacks. And this is a number, if you watch Dog Nation Daily, if you listen to Dog Nation Daily on a regular basis, you've heard me say this plenty, that 40 is kind of that magic number for sacks. That's when you go from being a defense that's just trying to keep people out of the end zone to now you're a defense that's actually doing something with the football. Your defense is almost playing offense because you're making those kind of impactful plays. Well, Georgia went over 40 sacks today in the 12th game of the season. That's a signal that this is a very different, I believe, very different kind of Georgia team than the one we last saw in the SEC championship in 2019. That doesn't guarantee any of the results that are going to come up after this, but certainly it speaks to a team that I think justifiably UGA fans ought to have more confidence in going into this postseason than maybe you had back in 2019. That team had lost as a 3-touchdown favorite to South Carolina, lost straight up on the field of the Gamecocks that year. Georgia hasn't been threatened by anyone since the first game of the season. And fans, I believe rightly so, are noticing that. It's one of the reasons why there's not going to be arrogance, there's not going to be boasting, there's not going to be things like that, but there is going to be a justifiable level of confidence going into the SEC championship. The data backs it up.
It's all the Braves, right? The Braves did this, right?
I think some of it. Honestly, I think when you see a team like that it also, in the minds of its fans, been long suffering. When you see a team like that break through, I do think it opens up more horizons for a lot of people.
And this speaks to Brandon. I was listening to you articulate all those valid points. I'm going to share what I was actually thinking. And I was like, it's going to be awfully hard for Alabama to beat this Georgia team twice. And that doesn't come from a position of hubris or smack or whatever. It's just how well this team has performed when you have a lot of teams that – is that the real version? Is that a belief in that team, or is that more of a dig on the team they played? You have a consistent standard of excellence, not trying to sound like the program leader of the Georgia Bulldogs here, but Brandon, they're checking all the boxes every week. They're doing it with different players. You're seeing guys get a lot better. Think about how much Broderick Jones has rolled right in there for Jamari Salyer now. And think about how you're getting a little bit more out of Cook. Brandon, to me, I thought this was oh my gosh, Kenny McIntosh has got some stuff going. He's going to be strutting down into Mercedes-Benz Stadium like, I'm a player too. The way the Georgia backfield looks, the Georgia receiving core, you're adding in a Dominator Don Blaylock, you're adding in a Marcus Rosemy-Jack Saint. Burton gets a touchdown today and almost decapitated a couple of my photographer brethren down there in that pit right there. And you see this Georgia team. You got Bowers now, you got Pickens. This is a team that's getting stronger when some teams are just trying to hold on to their playoff spot.
All right, I'm going to run through some comments here. And I met this lady the other day. I hope I pronounced her name right because we talked about this, and she gave me the pronunciation. Let me see if I can hit it. I believe it's Celicia. Did I do this right? I hope I did. Celicia Gagnon in the comment section says we need a week with absolutely no practice injuries. And I will admit, and Celicia, here's what your comment makes me think of is, and this came up a little earlier on the subject of injuries, not a guy who was injured today, but an injury I'm watching pretty closely because I do think he would be a pretty important player next week, and I don't know how I feel about his status as of yet, and that's Christopher Smith, who's such an important, whether it's a traditional safety role or, he played some kind of star position against the high-powered Tennessee offense a couple of weeks ago, but he was obviously seen hobbling pretty good before the Senior Day festivities a week ago against Charleston Southern. Did not play in that game, did not play or dress today, and I'm a little concerned about him. And, when I think about, look, there's going to be a part of me as a Georgia fan that's always going to be somewhat in search of what could go wrong. I don't mean to be that way. It's just kind of authentically who I am. The injury to Smith does remind me a little bit of like the Monty Rice thing in the 2018 SEC Championship, where it was kind of a quiet injury, didn't get a ton of attention, but I think that Georgia really missed Rice that day in a big way. And I do think that if Smith doesn't play, it's not going to show up on ESPN. You're going to have Kirk Herbstreit and Lee Corso talking about the absence of Christopher Smith. That's not a big enough storyline to rise the level of national attention, but that's an injury that could impact that game. It's not a thing that causes Georgia to lose it necessarily, but it's the kind of injury that could impact that game next Saturday. So for Celicia and the rest of the folks here paying attention to health this week, those health statuses updates on Christopher Smith are going to be really important.
Yeah, Brandon makes a good point there. All you folks out there, I say this tongue-in-cheek, but I would think Chris Smith probably needs to be on the prayer list for this week because of those reasons Brandon just articulated. Saw him today. He was walking off the field after enjoying the Tech win with some of his teammates, and I think the buzzword would probably say still looks a little ginger right there. He was not on any walking crutches, but he still looks like he's a little ginger right now.
Yeah, now we know Christopher's as tough as they come, but obviously seeing him last week, he was definitely – ginger's a pretty good way to describe that. He was walking pretty slow there last week, so prayers going up for him. Let me go over to YouTube here for a little bit. We'll get some more comments over there. Jeremy Harbin on the subject, I believe, of Todd Monken and the game plan here. I mean, I just think in a day like this, and I realize it's an overwhelmed opponent. I get all of that. But some of the stuff that Georgia does offensively right now is just so dadgum fun to watch. When they send these guys in motion, it's like, you send the running back in motion, and then you send the wall of tight ends over there, and you throw that screen to the back behind those tight ends blocking. Like, I don't know what you're supposed to do about that. I honestly don't know how you prevent that from being, at the very least, a 10-yard gain, if not busting into something even bigger than that. The creative way in which they're getting tight ends involved. Todd Monken is just coaching at such a high level right now. This is one of the most efficient offenses in the country. That's put on display again here today. And look, I said before, I'm not going to overstate the opponent that Georgia was playing, but the fact that Georgia from the word go came out and made that opponent look like that opponent, I think that says something there too. I'm having a blast watching this offense right now. I just think it's quite amazing how much of a well-oiled machine that it's playing like.
Yeah, Brandon, I talk to all the recruits, and one of my stock questions every week every time I interact with another big name is, listen, you know how to play some good football. You know what athletes are. And, Brandon, the comments I get in terms of feedback when they watch this Georgia offense, when they watch this Georgia defense, kind of putting both sides of it all together. Brandon, you mentioned the outmatched opponent. Well, Georgia's kind of done this to a lot of. I'm trying to package this game in my brain and kind of compare them with the rest of them. Georgia kind of made Arkansas look like this a little bit. Georgia kind of made a lot of teams look like this a little bit over the course of this season. And, the amount of dominant play this football team is putting together. Again, the marvelous thing, guys, I'm going to say it again. I rolled off a bunch of names. I didn't even mention the outside linebacker. All these players, you see Robert Beal getting more sacks today. Robert Beal's like he's like a flower. Just give him a little bit more sun, and he's going to sprout, and he's going to show you a little bit more. Really, I mean, Channing Tindall continues to play brilliant football. Nakobe Dean, Jordan Davis. You see Zion Logue making plays. You see Tremel Walthor in there now.
How much fun are you having with this? I don't mean to cut you off, but you're leading to something I want to make sure we hit. What's becoming really fun in these second halves is it's like 2022 G-Day. You know what I'm saying? It's like it's a lot of Chaz Chambliss. Chambliss today laid lumber on. Oh, my
what about
God.
JDJ? I mean,
Jamon Dumas-Johnson. That's what's becoming so much fun in a lot of these meaningless second halves, Jeff, is you're getting a chance to really see a lot of future playmakers. And,
Zaven Sorey, another guy played well today.
And that's so much fun right now is Georgia's handling its business, and you get a chance to watch guys that I do think are going to have legitimately have a real opportunity to be in starting roles maybe as soon as next season.
Yeah, all the way you look, the young guys are getting in. You're keeping the older veterans. And, folks, when everybody wants to analyze this team, I think the biggest thing to look at is this is the year when Georgia's major bricks, the major bones of this team, they're juniors and seniors, or they're super seniors, or they've been in the program 3 years or more. And that's why Georgia, that's a direct comparison. We'll make this point a lot when we discuss the Alabama matchup this week, is Alabama's best football players are freshmen and sophomores. Georgia's best football players are 21 and 22 and 23 years old.
And, Will in the YouTube comment section says, I will never doubt Alabama until Georgia beats them. I actually kind of agree with Will on that. Here's one of the things you've heard me say a lot, and you're going to continue to hear me say a lot. Week to week, game to game, Georgia has been clearly better during this regular season than Alabama has. That's just a fact. It's an objective truth. But that does not indicate what's going to happen when these teams play in the SEC Championship next Saturday. Georgia's still going to have to pitch, I don't want to say a perfect game, but they're going to have to go out there and play a huge game to beat Alabama. I mean, it starts with blocking Will Anderson, I believe. It starts with accounting for, what the quarterback, Bryce Young, is going to do in the run game. Alabama has not run Young a lot this year, at least as much as they possibly could, because they don't have much depth at the backup quarterback. But now it's do or die. Now it's win or go home. And you got to think that Alabama now is willing to take those chances with Young on the ground more so than they have in the past. And honestly, if I'm facing this Georgia defense, a running quarterback with the extra blocker you get because of that is probably a good and offensive play you have a chance to run. So keeping Young corralled when he runs the football, finding a way to block Will Anderson, I mean, we're going to go through all of this stuff ad nauseum, giving yourself a chance to take advantage of the biggest weakness that exists for Alabama. And I would say the biggest weakness on either team is the Alabama secondary. This has not been a stellar, typical Alabama defense, and it's issues in the back end that have been the biggest reason why. So giving yourself enough time, either because of Stetson Bennett's legs or because you bring in the extra blocker and you keep Will Anderson at bay. And they've also got Henry To'oTo'o and other guys like that have sacked the quarterback too. But to me, it's really those three things right there. Can you give yourself enough time to exploit the Alabama secondary? Can you keep Bryce Young from making big plays with his legs? Can you keep Will Anderson blocked? That's a lot of that early chatter for what I believe is going to decide this SEC championship next Saturday.
I'm going to tell you, Brandon, they can go to that well with Bryce Young, and that might be their best shot at taking down Georgia. But that thing's going to get battered and beaten and brittled up over the course of that game, and they might extinguish that well over the course of it. And I tell you what, Bryce Young leaves the field for Alabama because he's just taking a lot of hits from this Georgia defense. And, Alabama's margin, the way Alabama has a chance to knock off Georgia, decreases significantly. You look all around it. I think Alabama's going to have to run the ball a whole lot against Georgia, which is – that sounds really ludicrous to say that, but they've got to find a way, Alabama, to kind of protect Bryce Young and not have him be in the crosshairs of this Georgia Wolfpack and this tenacious defense for 60 minutes.
Tony Jackson in the YouTube comment section brings up something I think is really good. He mentions Dejon Edwards. Listen, I get so cracked up at this every single week. Do you know how much opposing defenses must hate this? Because they're tired, and they're just ready to go home. I mean, I can promise you, colliding with this Georgia bunch for 60 minutes is not a lot of fun. They hate playing this team. They're ready for the game to be over. And then, lo and behold, you bring in this back who's fresh as a daisy, who wants to show that he should be playing more than he is. He comes in there. He's running as hard as possible. I just laugh out loud when I watch Dejon Edwards come in there, and he's just churning and burning against a defense that wants no part of what he's bringing to the table. And, I mean, it just shows you the depth that Georgia has, because there's no doubt that Edwards could play for plenty of teams, and he's, playing an important role for Georgia there too. But you can obviously see in the future him doing even more of that. This is a guy that was not as heavily recruited as some of the running backs that you and I might talk about when you join me on Dog Nation Daily, but pretty clearly this is a guy that Dale McGee identified correctly as a guy who can play at the SEC level, and in the future he may get a chance to do more of that. But when he comes in late in these games and salts these leads away, he's showing you he can run the football.
There are times, Brandon, where he rightfully makes makes folks wonder and ponder, is he Georgia's second or third or fourth best running back in the pecking order? And watch this. Mark these words, folks. Everybody's going to think about succession plans and maybe a Jordan James or maybe a transfer portal guy or maybe the great Branson Robinson. Just you wait, folks. Just you wait. Dejon Edwards has played his way into an early, RB2 look at least for this Georgia offense. Because, Brandon, we ain't even seen this yet. Probably the best part of Dejon Edwards' game is as a receiver. That's what he looked like in high school, catching all those balls for Colquitt County and those Rush Probst offenses. I mean, he was a guy that was dynamic, three-down back, can run between the tackles. But the things he can do in space, the things he could give an offense a lift in the passing game, that's also really special. So
Ken Feinberg brings up an interesting point on Facebook. He says, what a playoff it's going to be. No Clemson. We've known that now for a while. He says now it looks like maybe no Ohio State. And if Georgia wins next Saturday, maybe no Alabama. It stands to reason that maybe no Oklahoma either. What if I could tell you at the beginning of the season, the playoff would not include Alabama, Ohio State, Oklahoma, or Clemson? I mean, put yourself back where you were in August. We've learned a lot since then. But where you were in August, if I could have told you that, I think your jaw would have hit the floor. But that's kind of what exists for Georgia right now, at least the potential to play a playoff without any of those teams. And listen, nothing's guaranteed, and next Saturday for Georgia is as tough a game as anyone's going to play in college football here this year. But if Georgia can get past that and look at a college football playoff that includes the likes of Michigan, Notre Dame, Cincinnati, whatever's left over, if what Ken Feinberg describes just comes true, then you'd be crazy not to like your chances if you're UGA. And this is the one level of, immodesty I'm going to allow myself to have. There is a chance that we look back on this, and what Georgia has been this year is 2013 Florida State. I mean, there's a chance that this is what this is. A team that just, for the most part, didn't play close games. Now, Florida State was challenged by Auburn in the BCS title game, the final BCS title game there in 2013. But there is at least some chance that we look back on this and say, oh, the challenge for Georgia never came because there was no one good enough to do that. And we've spent the entire season looking for, well, who's the great team that can threaten Georgia? Maybe Georgia's just the great team, and maybe this is just Georgia's year, and everyone, waves against a rock. Everyone kind of cracks up by comparison to UGA. Now, as I said before, that's not true until it is true. That's not true until it comes true. But much the same way you keep waiting for Georgia to be challenged, you have to also at least leave some room for the possibility that Georgia's going to be the one that does the challenging here moving forward.
Yeah, very well said. I mean, that's what I was kind of thinking. Maybe it's not the offensive fireworks that 2020 2020 Alabama and 2019 LSU were, but it's in a different way. Georgia's at 40 points per game now. And what are they, Brandon, now? It's an 8-point per game defense, a 7-point per game defense. A lot of shutouts, a lot of Power 5 shutouts. Doing it with a lot of second half churning and burning and getting the program's reserves ready as well. And, I mean, I shudder to think, Brandon, I don't know if there are any wishing wells. There are any wishes left in all the wishing wells in the state of Georgia right now for what the Braves did and for now what Georgia is doing. I remember, Brandon, you were kind of cackling a little bit when you talked about 7-8 weeks ago, give me a playoff with Iowa in there, Cincinnati in there, Notre Dame in there. You were cackling, and I mean, right now the instant reaction theater says the most likely playoff opponents for Georgia right now, it looks like Michigan, Cincinnati, Notre Dame, and Georgia.
Jeremy Harbin on YouTube says this defense plays better than any in the past because they play so well as a unit. That's what Kirby Smart said in the postgame earlier. The strength of our team is our team. It's another reason why I'm just really entertained by watching this. I got a Twitter message the other day where somebody said, BA, you said before the season started that you could judge how well the year is going by how much fun you're having watching these games and how much fun it looks like the team is having playing the games together. I mean, folks, look around at what you're seeing. Look at how much these guys are enjoying all of this. That's a real cue, a real clue about exactly what's happening in front of your eyes right now, and I do love it. And I do love the fact that this defense does just play so well together. They're all willing to kind of share that glory, share those snaps, share those stats, share everything that goes along with that. I am enjoying that a lot right now.
Brandon, we got final scores dropping. It looks like Dan Mullen was the problem with the Florida Gators because they knock off Florida State today.
That is a bad loss for Mike Norvell. I'm just going to tell you right now. I kind of saw this one coming a little bit, but that is a bad loss for Norvell. And I guess the Greg Knox era. Also, other news coming out of Gainesville is it looks like a lot of the big blue check media types have kind of zeroed in on Billy Napier as the next coach of Florida. That announcement could be made as soon as this weekend. So Florida gets a win over Florida State, and now Billy Napier, some random known name from a hyphenated school, is going to be the guy that tries to even things up in the Georgia-Florida rivalry. Good luck with that if you're a Gator fan.
Yeah, he has a little bit of Alabama pedigree on his resume. Doesn't have the resume that Dan Mullen had coming in.
That's exactly right. By the way, let me also point this out. So for those of you who are regular viewers to our Dog Nation post-game show, you'll remember Leaf Blower Gate. Remember that in Knoxville the other day? And we were just totally flummoxed and perplexed because there's always leaf blowers, there's always noise, there's always things like that going on. But it had never been as loud to the point we're getting all these great complaints. Come to find out there was a setting on the camera that was wrong. And listen, I'm not perfect. When I get something wrong, I'm happy to tell you about that. I'm not one of these guys that walks around thinking I do no wrong. Somehow a button got hit on the camera and the setting got messed up, and that's why you were hearing all that sound, because there's actually a leaf blower going on right now, and y'all tell me you can't hear that at all, right? I'm assuming you can't, because that's normally the way the situation goes there. But the point is that for those of you that kind of wondered what happened at Tennessee, I'll take the L on this. When I deserve an L, I'll take the L. And for the Tennessee postgame show, I had the setting all messed up.
That might be the only L we take on a postgame show all season. And I was wondering, Brandon, that might be a leaf blower's strength commensurate to the strength of the Georgia Tech football program right now.
Yeah, that's exactly right. All right, a couple other things we're going to get ready to. We're going to get ready to wrap up. First of all, this is our Dog Nation post-game show presented by the UGA Bookstore. Stop by the UGA Bookstore. This is going to be a special December to remember, if you will. And you want to be looking your best for. You want that Peter Millar stuff. You want that Nike coaches gear. You want that Vineyard Vines, that Tommy Bahama. You want that sharp-looking stuff. And you want to give everybody on your holiday shopping list some of that there as well. So UGA Bookstore, the place to go for that. UGABookstore.com if you can't be in Athens to do your shopping there in person. By the way, great run of autograph guests they've had there as well.
Want to hear some final numbers, Brandon?
Yeah, let's do that.
Stetson Bennett, 14 out of 20 for 255 yards, 4 touchdown passes. Kenny McIntosh, 66 yards rushing. Dejon Edwards, 43. McIntosh averages 33 yards per carry. Dejan averages 7.2. James Cook, 37 yards. Zamir White, 34 yards. Your leading receivers tonight, Brock Bowers, 3 catches, 100 yards. That yards per catch just keeps soaring, Brandon. You got McConkey with a touchdown. You got Jermaine Burton with a touchdown. You got George Pickens with 1 catch for 5 yards. Brandon, can you give me a reenactment of what happened when you saw George Pickens catch a ball for 5 yards?
I gave you, those of you like my chortles and things like that, I absolutely gave a big smile on my face when all that happened. I was quite happy. Now, and with the rest of the coastal elites in the press box, I have to keep it professional, but you better believe I was thrilled and very happy about all of that, for sure.
Somehow Georgia beats, I love this stat, Brandon. Somehow Georgia beats Tech by 45 in their own house, which they converted and renovated into their own house. They beat them by 45 to nothing. And yet Georgia Tech has a 5-minute edge in time of possession on the Bulldogs.
Yeah, listen, Jeff Collins, he was ready to get out of here. And they were running that play clock down to like 2 and 3 seconds before they snapped the ball. And listen, I wasn't complaining today because I was kind of ready to go home too. All right, hey, one final spin through this comment section. Let's make sure we have some fun with that. James Leonard Brown said Stetson Bennett balled out today. You better believe he did. Lucy Bowers-Boykin says she cannot hear the leaf blower. See, this is the way that it's supposed to go. Just in Tennessee, I wasn't doing what I was supposed to do.
Hey, Brandon, let me say one thing, because if you notice,
sorry, commenters.
If you've noticed, you know, Brandon and I, we love what we do. We're grinding, we're chopping wood to get this done. But I want to say thanks to you, Dog Nation, because you guys, it picks us up, man. You guys say, hey, man, how you doing? Did you make it back okay? How'd you do it? What, are you all right? Do you need some coffee or whatever? I want to say, and I'm sure Brandon feels the same way, we appreciate you guys, because it's almost like, not to sound like a Bette Midler song, but it charges us back up again when we see that what we're doing and everything matters, and that they notice that we're making an effort to try and do everything we can to provide the best coverage on Dog Nation that we can.
Michael Wilson says, when are we going to talk about that Bama privilege by the refs next week? Because we've got to mentally prepare for that. So Georgia fans on guard for anything there. By the way, we'll do our Marco's Pizza moment of the game there as well. Speaking of George Pickens, we'll celebrate him coming up in just a moment when it comes to that. Jacob O'Neill says people are also tuned out now because they're watching the Alabama-Auburn game. Well, that's the case. Now, y'all know you can do the second screen experience. You can watch the game and hold on to us there as well. He says people are doing film study on Alabama and Auburn now. So we're going to get ready to let y'all go and watch that game if that's what you already if that's what y'all want to do. Jason Moon says awesome teamwork, total talent, extraordinary victories. Yeah, it's been great to see that from Georgia all season long. A couple more comments here too. Somebody said the leaf blower was funny at Tennessee. Yeah, it may have been funny to some of y'all. I was so mad about that. So mad about that, just because I felt like I was the one that caused it. Greg Rosenberg says, does this Florida State loss impact Travis Hunter? Hard to believe that Norvell is going to make him the best he can be. Will Norvell even be there? I mean, that is a fair point to bring out. I mean, there's been online chatter about Travis Hunter anyway. The fact that there's such an implosion of such a high magnitude for Hunter, does that have any kind of impact on him?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to keep saying this. I mean, a lot of people like to put their own information out there, and like they like to sound really smart, and I'm sure they believe in the confidence and the information they have for their audience. I still think it's going to be very hard for Travis Hunter to go anywhere else but Florida State. He sees himself as the difference in that program, and you know the L's they catch, the disappointment they catch. Travis Hunter just kind of looks at that and says he can be the bridge to something a lot better.
So Scott Boland, this is my kind of guy. Scott says 2 screens. We're talking about doing the post-game shows as second screen experience. He says, I got 4 screens going right now. He's watching every game. He's got the post-game show on. Scott, that's my kind of football fan right there, and I'm glad you're having a good Saturday enjoying all of that. All right, we are going to get ready to go. Let's do our Marco's Pizza moment of the game before we get there. And today, a pretty easy choice for me. Jeff asked me what my celebration was when I saw that. You better believe I was smiling from ear to ear because I've been a huge fan of George the entire time that he's been at UGA. Obviously, I was devastated back in the spring when he suffered the injury, and part of that's because of what he brings to the football field, but also because I just like watching him. I think he's an incredible competitor. I think he's really, really fun. To me, Pickens is what college football is all about, a guy that comes out here and lays it on the line each and every time he plays. So I was devastated when he got hurt. And the thing that he came back today, even if it's just the slow start of something that may build to something by the time January rolls around, whatever the ultimate result was, just happy to have him back there playing. So an easy choice for our Marco's Pizza moment of the game. Congratulations to George Pickens coming back from his ACL injury to play here during the conclusion of the 2021 regular season. Will make him the Marco's Pizza moment of the game and make you aware that you can get great pizza here this weekend. You got, like our buddy Scott Bolin, watching 4 games at once or watching 3 games plus the Dog Nation postgame show. Enjoy some great pizza, go along with that. That's always a great idea. And great savings from Marco's Pizza as well. I'm talking about the great tasting pizza that comes baked perfectly golden brown each and every time on the crust. And it has those 3 cheeses perfectly melted and blended together with those old world authentic toppings on top of that. The great flavor of Marco's Pizza also comes at a great price. For now, you can get a large one-topping pizza for just $9.99. Right now, making dollars go as far as they can is a very important thing to be able to do. With Marco's Pizza, you get a chance to do that. You can get a large one-topping pizza for $9.99. So check out the Marco's app or marcospizza.com for a lot more on that. Marcos.com for a lot more on that. All right. I also want to tell you this, that coming up on Monday is a big day. You've heard me saying this on Dog Nation Daily now for quite a while, that the Dog Nation Cruise, our huge event that's going to take place in April, we're thinking this is going to be a very special season for UGA, and we have big plans to celebrate that with our friends from Royal Caribbean and the Cruise and Vacation Authority in April, going to the Nassau, going to Perfect Day Coco Cay, there on the Independence of the Seas, beautiful ship leaving out of Port Canaveral in April. The cruise goes on sale Monday. So this upcoming Monday, that's November 29th, that's the day. That's the cruise on sale day. So we'll talk about this Monday at Dog Nation Daily, but you can also, if you go to dognation.com, there's a tab right there at the top, and you can see more of that there. And you can find out how you can be a part of the Dog Nation Cruise. Jeff, we wanted to make this year the biggest ever in the history of Dog Nation. Obviously, the team is doing its part to make that true, but a chance to celebrate at Perfect Day Coco Cay in Nassau and on the Independence of the Seas with our friends at Royal Caribbean come April. How much fun is that going to be?
That'd be a Dog Nation celebration, would it not? I mean, everybody can sit there and talk about what's coming down the track in the Independence of the Seas? Is that
Independence of the Seas.
Look at that. Look at that. What it would be like to take over a boat and celebrate this Georgia football team. We'd love to have you guys there with us. And certainly, Brandon, you know, you want to talk about what's coming down the track? It's a 12-0 Georgia Bulldogs about to go play in the SEC championship game.
Yeah, no doubt about that. So great stuff all the way around. We'll see you Monday, Dog Nation Daily, for more information on that. But at dognation.com, the big Dog Nation Cruise goes on sale this upcoming Monday for a sailing to take place, leaving out of Port Canaveral starting on April the 25th in 2022. That's going to be a lot of fun. All right, final comments, and then we're going home because I am tired. On YouTube, last comments of the day. Jermaine King said he got Marco's last night. Jermaine, thanks for celebrating with us and enjoying yourself some Marco's Pizza. How about this? Roger Allen Martin says he gives Dog Nation an undefeated season. That's nice to know, Roger. That means a lot to us, and we've certainly enjoyed it, and we believe that the most fun moments are still yet to come, and I'm as excited about that as you possibly can be. Jeremy Harbin gives you a Go Dogs. Appreciate that. Back on Facebook for the final comments over there. Fred Gunn says one more time. He's looking forward to more fun to come here later on this season. Can't wait for that. Jacob O'Neill also watching Alabama right now. Hugh Nash says, I contend that before his time is up at UGA, Brock Bowers will be the first tight end to win a Heisman. So obviously that's high praise, but honestly for Bowers, almost anything seems possible. He's had that kind of year for the Dogs. They needed that weapon in the pass-catching game, and Brock Bowers has really turned out to be that guy, Jeff.
Some of the information coming out of the Kirby Smart press conference, something to chew on, and you guys will probably read it on dognation.com. Georgia coach Kirby Smart said they tried to get both Chris Smith and Jamari Salyer ready to go for this week. He said that Jamari had a setback in the middle of the week, some scar tissue, a different injury. That'll be certainly something to monitor heading into Alabama.
All right, so we're going to let you, speaking of monitoring, monitor this Alabama-Auburn game. Y'all tweet us your thoughts. Tell us what you're thinking about that. We'll talk about that on Monday. Beat Bama. There are only 2 words in all of Dog Nation that mean anything this week. Beat Bama. It's time to do it. This is the time. It's not the last chance, but it may be the best chance. And certainly the next chance is the one that Georgia fans want to enjoy and take advantage of. So everybody you see, give them a Merry Christmas, give them a Happy Thanksgiving, but give them a Beat Bama too, because that is the way in which Georgia fans get their mind right what's going to happen just down the road, right there at the corner of Marietta Street next week at and Northside at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. The Alabama Crimson Tide. It's time for Georgia to give them something. So get ready next Saturday. Let's beat Bama, and let's spend the entire week here around Dog Nation getting ready to do just that. Y'all, thanks so much for being here with us for our Dog Nation postgame show presented by the UGA Bookstore. Sure enough, I hope you did have a happy Thanksgiving. I hope you enjoyed watching the Dogs go 12-0 in the regular season today. But it's 0-0 starting next week. What is it, Kirby? It's 0 to flipping 0 starting next week when it comes to the overall record for Georgia, because it starts to count for real next week. Beat Bama. Time to do it. Have a good weekend. We'll see you next time. Dog Nation postgame show presented by the UGA Bookstore. Talk to you soon, everybody.